Hello everyone, welcome back to the Indie Geek Guy channel, and today we're going to be ranking Season 12 of Doctor Who. So why am I starting with Season 12? Why am I just randomly jumping in sort of the middle of Classic Who to do this? Well, Season 12 for me has a lot of nostalgia value. It might be, in my opinion, one of the best seasons of the show, sort of back to finish in terms of just being a fun ride going all the way through. Like I say, I have a lot of nostalgia for it. It is the first season of the show that I saw from beginning to end. I'd seen a fair bit of Doctor Who up to this point. I had consumed all of my dad's VHSs he didn't have all of season 12. He only had Robot. So make whatever judgment you want there. But no, this was back in the days of UK Gold, airing the show on the weekends in their omnibus forms. This was the first season that I got to see beginning to end from each weekend. And from there, it sort of like sealed itself onto me. Like it lives rent-free in my head this season. If anything, I pay it money to be in there. Like, that's what it feels like. It's such a part of my psyche this season that it makes it very easy to talk about, which is good. Obviously, it's the season that introduced Tom Baker as the Fourth Doctor, which makes it a bit of a landmark for a lot of people, including myself. But also, you know, it's the relationship between him, Elisabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane, Ian Marter as Harry Sullivan, who I think are one of, if not the best teams that have ever been on the TARDIS. It's such a shame that it only lasted for one season, but it is undoubtedly one of my favourite TARDIS teams. So with that in mind, you can probably gather that this is a hard season for me to rank, to try and put them in definitive spots of which ones I like most compared to the others, because I do love them all, despite, you know, you're all thinking right now one particular story like, are you sure? But I do love them all, and I think nostalgia does play into that. But here we go anyway, we're going to jump into this. So at number 5, at a surprise to no one, is Revenge of the Cybermen. Here's the thing about Revenge of the Cybermen. I don't hate it. I don't. It's fun, B-movie level kind of silliness. But there is problems with it, and we'll sort of go through why that has put it at the number 5 spot. The obvious kind of reason... Oh my god, the wind. The wind is going crazy. The wind, it's going to blow over the flat. It's going badly out there. So first and foremost, Revenge of the Cybermen has a silly plot, to put it lightly. It is essentially the Cybermen, and they want to blow up a rock. That's the basic boiled down version of this story. And the rock essentially has its tongue sticking out, saying, "You're a bunch of idiots. You can't do this job properly." And just to make it more convoluted, they come up with this whole scheme in order to like poison the people on the space station orbiting said rock. It doesn't feel like they thought this plan through at all. It's essentially like they had some sort of weird pitch meeting somewhere. So there's this planet of gold we need to get rid of. How do we think we're getting rid of that?
Why is the gold a big problem? What is that an issue for us?
Oh yeah, we don't like gold anymore. Gold's bad for us. It can kill us. We need to get rid of it.
Oh, okay. Well, I wish someone had told me that sooner. But sure. Why don't we just blow it up? We're Cybermen. That's what we do. We can blow things up. Surely.
I like it, but I feel like it needs just an extra bit of spice, just some more goodness in there.
Oh, okay. Let's. I don't know. Why don't we just poison all of the crew members of the ship that's orbiting it and play it off as some space plague? I think that could work for us, right? That could be good. Add that spice in there you're looking for.
Excellent. It is a interesting setup for a plot. Let's put it that way. But also, the Cybermen themselves are just not that threatening in the story. There's a lot of them walking around trying to be robots, but not really pulling it off.
You speak unwisely.
It's like the opposite end of the 80s Cybermen, where the 80s Cybermen could get quite emotional, but they always felt cold and calculating in that emotion. Here, they just seem very irate a lot of the time.
We detected an operational discharge from the transmat area. Explain that.
But not that scary kind of irate or angry. It's just frustrated that this guy in a stupid scarf is getting on their nerves kind of irate. The other thing I think that holds this story back is that Tom Baker in this story clearly isn't as invested in it as the rest of the season. Like he just doesn't seem to be taking it quite as seriously. He doesn't feel like he needs to play up the threat of the Cybermen because he knows, it's as if he knows the Cybermen aren't coming across as scary, so he plays into that. And he just makes them look even more foolish. Like, he is like the polar opposite of him and Davros, which we'll talk about later, but he clearly sees that situation as a great, intense bit of acting moment, and he can do that. But with these Cybermen, he's just kind of like, mostly playing it off with jokes. There's a couple of good moments in there that work as good humor, but also delivering a sense of like threat that they're in.
Careful, I might explode.
But overall, I feel like Tom just wasn't as like convinced by the story as a whole. Needless to say, as I said, I don't hate it. I actually kind of like the opening part with the setup, with the moody atmosphere of all the dead bodies and like this mystery of, like, if you're watching it for the first time, I can see how that would hook you in. Like, they're back on the Nerva beacon from the previous story in the season. There's dead bodies everywhere. What is going on? You've seen Cybermen in the title, so you kind of know they must be involved. But it's like, what is happening here and why is it happening? And so I kind of like part one for that. But once you've seen the story in its entirety, it does kind of lose its weight a little bit. But, you know, as I say, it's fun B-movie level kind of goodness, I find, this story. Like, there's a lot of obvious beats, like the obvious traitor is obvious, who also turns out to be another convoluted plot point of, oh, he's actually a double agent. But then to add on to this whole situation is that on the planet of Gold itself, you have a warring civil war, faction war going on, which I've never really understood. Overall, I just feel that this story was a little bit more rushed through, and that's the weakest part of it. Like, it needed another pass on the script to tighten it up and to make more sense out of it. So I don't know. It's a clear, to me at least, and I'm sure there's probably are people who love this story very much, and I do not blame you for it, because as I say, I think it's fun. I just think the glue that holds it together is not particularly good. So, you know, that's Revenge of the Cybermen. It's at number 5. There's some good stuff in there, like there's very memeable moments in there.
Harry Sullivan is an imbecile!
But other than that, it is clearly for me the weakest of the season, and it's kind of a shame that the season ends on that note. But like I say, I have fun with it. It's just clearly not the strongest of the stories in the season. Moving on to number 4, Robot. Now, Robot, again, is the first story from the season I had seen. It holds a lot of nostalgia for me. I'd seen Robot, as I said at the beginning of the video, before I'd watched the season, so I already sort of knew of it. But it is that kind of big, bombastic unit story. But then also on top of that, you have the introduction to Tom Baker as the Doctor, which is fantastic. The moment he emerges from the TARDIS in his costume for the first time is just magic. You get such a sense of arrival in that moment. Obviously, there's a lot of eccentric stuff before that, but when he's sort of recovering from the regeneration, but it is kind of remarkable how quickly Tom Baker just gets into that role and he finds himself there and he knows what he's doing, like this ball of energy just consuming every scene that he's in. And it is incredible to behold it. Like I say, that nothing sums it up better than the moment he first comes out in his costume. The little Doctor Who theme-esque music that plays as he it's great. It's a wonderful little moment that, you know, lasts all of like 3 seconds, but it is such a magic moment in my mind and memory.
Well, how about this?
And let me tell you something else about Robot. Robot doesn't lie. The title gives you exactly what it says on the tin. You get a lot of robot for your money. The robot itself is, I would say, maybe slightly over-designed and under-designed simultaneously. Like, it is definitely a robot who skips leg day. Like, all I'm saying is if the Terminators used this as their endoskeleton, it would look very, very weird, even for Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't even think if you wrapped Arnold Schwarzenegger's skin on there, it would work. The shots of the robot that work are the ones where you basically get the upper chest piece and the head, look at the camera pointing upwards towards it. The moment you see those waddly little legs, it sort of defeats the illusion a little bit. There are one of the reasons this story comes in at 4 for me is some of the directional choices that are made in the action sequences, where it does look like the robot is just a big wobbly silver chicken, just waddling around whilst people sort of undynamically shoot at it. And that's one of the weakest elements of the story. And there's one scene in particular when one of the villains is hiding behind the robot, and it's like, why is he not getting shot? Are these unit soldiers just really, really bad at their jobs, or like what is going on? But yeah, there is some odd directional choices in regards to that, and I feel like it could have been done a lot better had they just tightened in a lot more on the robot, kept it looking upward so it looks strong and powerful, got some reaction shots from the unit soldiers, and played it that way, and it might have worked a bit better. Granted, obviously, Doctor Who in the 70s recorded to a tight schedule, tight budget. They have to get things done quickly, and I understand that, but I feel like it is very doable to have filmed that stuff in a slightly different way, and it would have worked better and felt a bit more dynamic, especially for the time in which it's being made. Not only did we get the introduction to Tom Baker's fourth Doctor here, we also got Ian Marter as Harry, and I love Harry. He's just the right level of sort of clumsy and foolhardy that is not annoying, is just endearing, and he's also, he just wants to do the best that he can. Much like Tom Baker, he just comes into the show and he's instantly likable to me. He's very old-fashioned, but again, it doesn't come off as annoying, mainly because Sarah or the Doctor are there to try settle down, Harry, all right? But I do love his he's clearly a kind-hearted character, and that's what shines through the most. And I think him and the Doctor have an interesting relationship throughout this season, in that they clearly have a respect and a friendship with one another. But it's very designed that Harry was a character designed because they weren't sure how, obviously, the new Doctor was going to work out. They wanted a younger male character in case they casted older, if that actor wasn't going to be able to do the action sequences. But obviously, Tom came along and was very capable of doing all that stuff. So, obviously, sadly, it puts Harry sort of on this back bench a little bit in terms of what he's actually doing in the story. But I think Ian Marter's performance is just, like I say, very endearing, and I love this TARDIS team so much together, that they have such a nice, friendly dynamic where they're just the right amount at odds with each other in the right moments, but then they're very supportive of one another in the right moments, and it all just balances out nicely. The actors seem to get on really well, and yeah, it's magic. The other thing that sort of drops this story down, in my estimations, a little bit is not at fault of this story. It's the fact that a story later on in the season has a very similar plot line, but does it a lot better. So obviously the idea here is that we've got like a think tank of elites who see themselves above everybody else, and they're trying to enable that, and they're seeking to make sure that they are put at the top of the totem pole and everybody else does what they say. It's dictatorship by numbers, essentially. They never come across quite as threatening, especially in comparison to the story later down the line. They just come off as a lot of petulant children who are just screaming to get their own way. And again, it's not very threatening. Obviously, I feel that's maybe kind of the point, that to sort of show sort of how ridiculous that thought process is, and the Doctor constantly making them look like idiots is always delightful. But I kind of want there to be a little bit of threat there as well, which I never really get with this think tank lot. They just come off as a bunch of, like I say, children screaming and shouting at how they want the world to be, and yeah, it never really comes off as a threat. But most of all, with this story, I mean, there's a lot of plot conveniences. Like, there's moments where they say they've hidden in a bunker, we don't know where they've gone. Cut to next scene, they found the bunker immediately.
Do you know where they're going? Have you any idea at all?
Well, sir, I heard somebody mention the bunker.
He said something about them going to a bunker.
10 seconds later.
Well, this is the place.
Like, there's a lot of moments like that in the story as well, which just very convenient moments, which, okay, we're just leaping to it, which in some ways helps like the just bombastic pace of the story, but it does come off as a little bit too convenient at times as well. And obviously, let's talk about some of the effects used here. Part of me admires the sheer balls of it. Like, I love the idea that Terrance Dicks came up with we're going to do King Kong with a robot, and then just commits to it. Everyone on that production just commits to the idea, and even if it means doing really ineffective visual effects to try and achieve it, but I admire it so much. It's like this story sums up what I love about classic Doctor Who in a nutshell, really. Taking a big idea, wanting to commit to it, and not like beat around the bushes. Like, we're doing this, we're going to do this. Like, even if we look silly doing it, we're going to make it work. We're going to do it, and that I cherish that so much. It's so much a part of the charm of the show overall that works for me. Now, obviously, when this first aired, a lot of that stuff probably worked a lot better. For me, for instance, I didn't question that was a toy tank in that scene that tries to blow up the robot. Like, I was watching it on that very TV back there on a VHS, and it probably convinced me. So, in 1975, when this aired, I can imagine double so that would have worked. So when I talk about classic Doctor Who, I try to think of it in those terms. Like, it was being watched once and only once. It wasn't repeated very much, or if at all. And it was viewed on TVs that were not high definition. Like, some of them barely even standard definition. So a lot of that stuff probably would have worked a lot more at the time of its original broadcast. And that's something I always try to keep in mind. And obviously, I think because I watched the show originally when I was very young, it's easy for me to sort of get over those hurdles. Even though as an adult now, I'm like, even then they might have been able to do some of this stuff a bit better. But overall, you know, this story in particular just sums up my admiration for them committing to an idea. Like, sure, we'll make Elisabeth Sladen look like a tiny little doll, and then we'll make Liz Sladen cling onto a chimney that clearly isn't there, but by God, does she commit? Does she commit to that? So overall, I think Robot's a lot of fun. It's got a lot of magical moments. Tom Baker is instantly the Doctor. He just comes in and owns it, which is really the magic of this story. It's so much him, Sarah and Harry, and the Brigadier, of course, who I somehow haven't mentioned yet, because he's great. Him and Tom are great together. It's a real shame that we don't get more of them together across the show in Tom's era. Like, we only got them twice together, and it's a damn shame, because they work really well against one another. Like, there's just the right amount of we have differing opinions, but we have respect for one another. We're going to try and learn from each other if we can. Like, the balance between those two is so good. It's, like I say, it's a shame we didn't get to see more of it. But yeah, that's my overarching sort of sentiment towards Robot as a story, is that it is fun, and I think that's overall the point. Although I will say, between this one and the third place spot, it was tight. Like, I flip-flopped between these two a lot in terms of where I was going to put them, and like I say, season 12 is incredibly hard to rank for me because I love all of it, but that's where we've gone for Robot. Coming in at number 3 is the Sontaran Experiment. Here's the thing about the Sontaran Experiment. For me, it's got something that, you know, just appeals to me because I'm a depressed, melancholic sort of person, is that it has a dark, kind of moody atmosphere from the very beginning. Like, when you arrive on an Earth that has been desolated by solar flares, regrown, but they're meant to be standing in the middle of London, and it's just fields and hills and rocks, and it's got like a melancholy feel to it. Like, Earth has been reborn, but at what cost sort of vibe. Like, like a tragedy has struck this place, and we're now walking in the aftermath of that. And I love that melancholic feel that gives.
Trafalgar Square should be that way.
Trafalgar Square?
If this is Piccadilly.
You're joking. Aren't you?
I also love the initial mystery in terms of what's going on in the story. Like, when we introduce ourselves to the characters who are on the planet stranded there, talking about this creature living up in the rocks. Obviously, Sontaran is in the title, so we kind of know what's going to happen. But I love the idea of saying it up that way. Like, there's this creature living in the rocks, and people go vanishing over there. And I love that kind of setup. Also, from the very beginning of the story, we get some great interplay between the regulars. You know, Dr. Harry and Sarah are on really good form from the beginning. Like, they're having fun with one another. The realization between Harry and Sarah as they sort of put together that they're meant to be walking through London in this distant future is a really nice scene between the two of them.
Not much in the way of life, is there?
It's rather creepy. Doesn't seem like Earth at all.
I don't know. Nice and tidy anyway.
And then we get to the Sontaran himself. The Sontaran in the story, although the makeup for the Sontaran isn't as good as in the Time Warrior, this Sontaran comes across as so kind of slimy and gross. Like, he's so unaffected by what he's doing to these people. And it just creeps me out. It creeped me out as a kid, and it's still really creepy to this day, though. He's just just so unflinching in what he's doing to these people and the torturous experiments that he's putting them through. It really does come across as threatening, and I want to see this thing get beaten. And the experiments themselves are really effective. Like, the guy dying first is... I watched this just the other day, and I was like, that is grim. Like, that is straight up grim, like how horrible that is portrayed. And the actor does a really great job, because I believe it. I believe that guy's been hanging there for days with no water. Which also leads into a really great moment for Harry, I feel like. It's a moment when Harry kind of believes that Sarah has been killed by an experiment, the doctor's been shot, he believes he's dead, and then the guy he was trying to help from, like, he knows how to save this guy who's dying from, like, thirst. He knows how to save him, but he just can't break him out of the bonds that he's from, and he can't do anything about it, and he discovers his body as well. And there's this great moment where Harry is just like, I'm doing this. I'm going to sort this out myself. He's more than prepared to go and beat the Sontaran over the head with a stick. Like, literally, it's a great performance from Ian Marter where he's just like, I'm doing this. Like, everyone around me is dead. I'm probably dead because I'm not getting off this planet on my own. So I'm taking this Sontaran out if it kills me.
Both of them.
And overall, the story is just, it's 2 parts. It's short and sweet. It gets to the point, like, I think it's just very, like, it gets from beginning, middle to end fairly quickly. You can watch the whole thing in one sitting really easily. But yeah, I just love the dark, moody atmosphere at the start. I love how gross this Sontaran is. I do wish the makeup was a bit better for him on this one. Like, if it could be more close to the Sontaran in the Time War, especially since Sarah's meant to recognize him as, like, the same Sontaran to start with. Like, no, can't be you, you're dead, but he doesn't look anything like him. So that's a bit, like, I mean, I don't know why they changed it. Maybe they thought it would look better, like it gave it more eye movement or something like that, but personally I think the Time Warrior looks a lot better. And the main problem with this story is that there is a question about how much sense the Sontaran plan actually is. Because the whole thing is that the Sontaran is doing experiments on humans for an invasion on Earth. But the thing is, the Earth is empty. There are no humans on it. So it's like, why are we doing these experiments? You're doing them to invade Earth, even though there's no humans there to be worried about. So you could just take it over if you wanted to. I always assumed as a kid, and now that what it was is that if they take over Earth, that maybe humans would try and come back and take over, and they want to have the knowledge of the humans to repel any such attack or whatever. Or if they just push further into human space in their war of the Routons, they're going to come across humans and they want to know their weaknesses. That's what I always kind of assumed going into it. But based on the face of it and watching it just the other day, it does come across as they're doing these experiments as, we're trying to invade Earth and we need to know how to kill all the humans. But there are no humans on the Earth other than the ones that we've lured here. So, I don't know. It's a bit like yeah. To be fair to the story, it also plays into the sort of stupidness of the Sontarans. There's always been an element of their warmongering kind of making them a bit stupid. And the Doctor obviously uses that to defeat them in a very convenient way. Like, he's just like, oh, you can't do anything. You haven't got the report from your mate here, so you're not doing anything. You haven't got the intelligence report. And then the Sontaran's just like, oh yeah, I suppose you're right. Oh, we won't attack then. We'll go on our merry way. Which, seems a little bit convenient. You feel like they might just try and blow up the planet or something anyway. But whatever. It's a fun sort of play on the Sontaran's sort of stupidity and their warmongering and how the Doctor uses that against them. That's the overall point, and that's what I take from it. But that criticism could be leveled at it. But yeah, overall, as I say, short, sweet. I really like the atmosphere. I really like the location work on here. Like, it's really imposing when they have the shots of the actual rocks that the Sontaran's meant to be like lurking in, and that's quite effective. And yeah, it's a fun time. Ooh, this is where things are going to get spicy on this list. People are probably going to get annoyed with me here. Let's see how this plays. Coming in at number 2 is Genesis of the Daleks. Now, don't hate me. Don't hate me about this, okay? I have my opinions, you have yours. It's all gravy, okay? Nobody needs to get hurt in this. But in all honesty, this was really hard to choose between this one and the next one. Like, I thought I was flip-flopping on the other two. This was even worse. Like, I was like, where do I fall on this? Because I love love both of these stories, and it was really hard to choose which one goes where. And having watched these two this past week, and I was like, what one do I truly like the most? And this is how it fell upon this viewing. If you were to ask me in a couple weeks' time, I might change my mind, but this is where we are as I'm recording this. So it kind of goes without saying that Genesis of the Daleks is one of the most perfect Doctor Who stories in its entire run. I love the bleakness, the unrelenting, just doesn't pull any punches of how dark and how awful the situation on Skaro has become at this point in its history. The fact that that is what leads to the creation of the Daleks makes sense. Like, you feel like that's the only way that would come about. Like, things on Skaro have to be so bad that they turn to making these bubbling mutants of absolute hate in a metal tank. Like, it plays into that, and it feels so truthful to what that whole thing is representing. I absolutely adore that. Like, the opening sequence in this episode is so effective. It's something they would never get away with in modern Who. They'd never be able to do something like this at the start of an episode, I don't think. The direction is so good in terms of just portraying the awfulness of war. But I do kind of love how it sets up this awful shooting, gunning down of people in this war setting, and then amongst the fog of this battle outsteps the Doctor in this sort of beam of the audience knows there is our hope. There is our way of trying to make this better. And it's a wonderful little sequence that is really effective. Like, the way the Doctor just emerges at first, and it's just like that, like in a hero pose, and then sort of instantly afterwards he just starts going, it's a bit cold. Also, I love the setup. This is one of the things why I'm sad that the Time Lords in the new show have been sort of renegated out. They've been pushed out because current showrunners and whatever think they're too boring, audience can't relate to them, all that kind of stuff, which is kind of the point to them in my mind. But I miss them because with them in the show, it allows stories like this where they pop in, take control of the Doctor's life for a moment, and he's very like, you fucking guys, can't you just leave me alone? I miss that in Doctor Who. I miss the fact that the Time Lords can be a pain in the arse and come in and try and take over the Doctor's life in such a way, and I miss that stuff. And it works really well here. Like, the Doctor is sort of put between a rock and a hard place, and he's like, I don't want to do what you tell me to do because you guys are annoying. Like, leave me alone. And then they're like, Daleks. And he's like, okay. What about them? You're giving me permission to try and make them less evil. Okay, I can go along with this. That's an interesting setup to begin with. The fact that we're told constantly you can't change events, and here's the Time Lords getting directly involved in saying, let's try and change events because we think this will be for the better. And, you know, that leads to all sorts of interesting consequences. And also, to New Who's credit, they've sort of underpinned that a little bit, like where they've said, well, you know, they started this shit. On top of that, as I was saying about Robot, the whole idea of an elite group thinking they're better than everybody else they want to take over, this story does that, but in a much more effective way in my mind. So a big part of the plot is that how the Khalids have basically nominated an elite group of scientists and some military groups into this bunker away from their home. They're living underground, and they're basically controlling everything in this war effort now. Like, all of it has come down to them. So much so that they've put Davros, this absolute tyrant of a bastard, in charge. You know, it very much replicates the feel of the build-up to World War II in a lot of ways, where an absolute madman has been put in charge because everyone thinks that, okay, he's got the right idea, apparently. But what this story does that Robot doesn't do is that it sets up how that has come about. And because of that, it feels like Davros and those who follow him and the Daleks are a threat. They feel like a legitimate threat, of both on people's lives, but also freedoms and all of that. Like, they feel like a legitimate threat to sort of the ecosystem of this planet in a lot of ways. The other thing I do love about the story, though, is that there are no real good guys other than sort of our main cast and those affected by this war in negative ways. Like, everyone who is fighting this war, both the Khalids, who will later become the Daleks, and the Fouls, who we've previously seen in other stories as a peace-loving race, the Fouls here are just as bad as the Khalids in this war, and a war that they've probably lost any sense of what even started it. But they're both sides, like, contemplating genocide in order to win this thing and to make it over. And the only thing that separates Davros as his, like, next tier of villain is that he's contemplating genocide of not only of the Fouls, but of his own people to get his own way. That's the only thing that makes him worse. You know, that, and he wants to shove his people inside metal tanks. That's also pretty bad as well.
The Council has signed the death warrant of the whole of the Khalid people. Only we, the elite, we and the Daleks will go on.
But both sides of this war are doing pretty despicable things. And again, it plays into the horrors of war, what it does to people, and the effects of all that. It's just very effective. One thing people say a lot about Genesis of the Daleks, where they try to make it like a criticism, is that the Daleks don't feature very much in the story, which is true. They don't, but the story is always about them in some way. That they are like a loaded gun in the background, and it's ready to be fired. And it is this building of, we all know, the audience knows, the Doctor knows what is coming, and he knows, despite how awful things are on the planet right now, if he doesn't do something, it's going to get a lot worse. And that is, you know, that's always playing on your mind. It kind of reminds me of like movies, like, I suppose like a Tarantino movie and like his early days, where if someone's holding a gun, you know it's not going to be like a shootout in like a normal action movie where people are going to miss everywhere. It's not going to be as effective or whatever. You know that that loaded gun is going to go off, and when it does go off, someone's going to die. And it's going to affect the story moving forwards. And that's what the Daleks bring to Genesis of the Daleks. They are that in this story. Obviously, one of the big standout moments in this whole thing is just the relationship and interplay between Tom Baker and Davros. Like, that beginning of that relationship, that feud, that borderline respect for one another's minds is so well played, and it's the opposite of Tom Baker in the Cyberman story. He is playing to an actor who is really delivering a scary performance of this villain. He just raises it to another level in this story. He realizes the threat level of this person. He realizes that he needs to play it just as intense. But you also get a hint of the Doctor being like, if this guy wasn't fighting this war, he could do so much good. He's so smart and clever that he could do so much better for the universe. But no, he's trapped in this war, and he's trapped in this situation where he's trying to fight for the survival of his people with whatever cost, even if it means killing off his own people. That's how warped he has become. You know, it's that thing about the Doctor where he tries to see where it went wrong. Can he help someone? That kind of thing. But at the same time, he's kind of disgusted by what Davros is doing, and it's such a fun relationship to see that being born here. And I don't think it could have been done any better to sort of start off that relationship.
It's the minds of the creatures inside them. Minds that you created. They are totally evil.
Evil? No! No, I will not accept that.
It's quite long. It is a long story. I think that's really the only thing that stops it from being number one for me. Although I will say, I think largely it carries the weight of its length for the most part. And that's hard to do, but it is a more slower paced story, and that's fine as well. But, I had to place these somehow. All right, people, I had to do this somehow. Okay, I know it's a weak excuse. It's all I've got, okay? I'm sorry. But there are just things about the next story that appeal to me a little bit more. If I could, I would put them as equal number one, but that's not the way the list works. So that means coming in the number one spot for season 12 for me is The Ark in Space. I love this story beginning to end. Like, I enjoy the whole thing. I love the dynamics between the main cast and then the cast who get introduced as the story goes on. I really enjoy, like, Harry and the Doctor in here have some really funny moments together that I enjoy immensely.
Get down, Harry.
What is it?
Keep your head down.
But overall, I'm a big fan of the movie Alien, and this was essentially Alien before Alien, if you want to put it in very simple terms. Like, it just nails that atmosphere, even though there's a lot of brightly lit scenes in this very white looking set. But I kind of love the set. I love the set of Nova Beacon for some reason. There's something about that 70s sci-fi design that just tickles my brain. Like, for some reason in this story, even though it's all very bright, it never comes across to me as like an overlit set. It always feels like a space station that is very clinical, which makes sense in the context of the story of these humans who have been frozen to try and survive the calamity of Earth being wiped out by solar flares. And, you know, the look of the station always made sense to me in that context. So it's even more effective within the story when the lights start going out, the power starts getting cut, and it instantly just changes the mood of that place, and it instantly becomes a lot more scary, and it's just very effective. Like, that big set with them all in the cocoons is such a incredible set for 70s Doctor Who. It's like burnt into my brain. And the scenes in the power stacks and all of that is genuinely frightening. Like, the larvae inside that little metal glass sheet is generally unnerving and creepy, and the little eyeball like looking around and all that stuff, it's creepy. It's really effective. And as a big horror fan, this is probably one of those early things for me where, like, I like horror. I think I like horror. As a kid, I was watching this, and I think I'm realizing, like, subconsciously sort of putting that together. And I love how the situation just builds to getting worse and worse and worse. Like, every step of the way throughout the story, it's just continuingly making the situation worse for our characters, and like, how are they going to get out of this, and the inventiveness they go through in order to do it. And I have to say, I think Tom's performance in Genesis of the Daleks with Davros is incredible. It's really, really good. But I find Tom's performance throughout the arc in space incredible. Like, he goes through so many motions. He's a hero. He's funny. He gets possessed, and it clearly affects him. Like, he's trying to look into the mind of the Wirren, and it does something weird to his brain. And then even after the fact, he's all sort of possessed by it. And, you know, it's a really great performance there. He has sorrow when someone else has sacrificed their life for him, and you can see how it's affected him. Like, he wished it was him instead. It's painted on his face.
Where's Rogan?
Rogan's dead. I woke up in a protection hatch.
Doctor, you're safe.
Yes. We're all safe now, Sarah, thanks to Rogan's bravery.
And obviously there's that speech that he gives, the human's speech, that is obviously iconic to this day. Like, in so many ways, I feel like this story really just did everything for Tom Baker's Doctor and summed him up in that big ball of energy that he is. And he went, like I say, he just went through the gambit throughout the story of different levels of his character that he decided to bring to it. And overall, I just find the story very tight and effective. For 4 parts, like I say, gradually the situation is always getting worse. There's always a new thing. The way that the monster works, the Wirren, like, it starts off as a larval stage, and you're like, what is this? What's going on? How much of a threat is this? Then it gets to its pupal stage, which is kind of gross and borderline like body horror kind of thing going on there. And then it gets to its actual fully grown state, and it's like, well, we got to do something or we are fucked. Now, obviously, the Wirren themselves look a bit dated by today's standards. They are the literal Doctor Who has bubble wrap monsters, because literally they use bubble wrap for the monster. But important thing to point out is that when this was being made, bubble wrap was brand new. No one knew what bubble wrap was. So, you know, you have to keep these things in your head. But I actually think it's kind of gross and effective. I mean, they could have added maybe some slime to it, or like onto the prosthetic-y kind of bubble wrap thing that they start putting on Noah, one of the characters, as he starts to transform. That might have been a bit more effective. But as a kid, I remember not being bothered by that at all. Again, probably on this very TV over here. But I think what works about it, even though the design of it might look dated by today's standards, is the intent always comes across, and the intent is very frightening. Like, this transformation, this you're seeing the slow death of this human character as he is taken over by the Wirren. And then the further implication of what they're going to do to all the other humans who are still in cryo sleep is kind of gross.
Ever heard of the Eumenides? It's a genus of wasps that paralyzes caterpillars and lays its eggs in their bodies. When the larvae emerge, they have a ready-made food supply. Strange how the same life patterns recur throughout the universe.
And is, you know, straight out of sci-fi horror. And like I say, that is like my prime thing in my brain that I enjoy. So it just ticks all those boxes for me, and I truly just love it for that. Yes, I'm a dark soul who enjoys body horror and gross stuff. I'm sorry, okay? And yeah, the story is just never boring for me. It's always enjoyable. I think all the performances are great. There's obviously the great moment with Sarah Jane in the vent. Like, she takes it upon herself to, I'm going to do this. I'm going to deliver the crucial power line that's going to save us all across the entire arc through this tiny vent. And then Tom has to sort of coax her out. Like, you can do the final push by doing like a reverse psychology. Obviously, that's a very like famous scene and sort of seals their friendship. I think it's that moment that really like seals the sort of Sarah Jane Fourth Doctor dynamic, and you know, goes from strength from there on out. But yeah, I love Ark in Space. It is truly great. As I say, if you were to ask me another week, I may swap Genesis of the Daleks and Ark in Space around. That might happen, but as of right now, that's where I fall, given that I just watched these like this week. So that's where I am right now, and I love the Ark in Space. It's really good. Don't let the design of the monster put you off if you're completely new to old Doctor Who. Just go in and look at it for the intent that is trying to be given over to you as the audience. Like, I think it's still effective to this day. Yeah, that was season 12 of Doctor Who. Tom Baker's first season as the Doctor. That is my rankings. Let me know if you agree, disagree. Your list might be completely reversed to mine. I'd be interested to see about that and hear that. But like I say, I love season 12. I love all of it. Even the silliness of Revenge of the Cybermen, I love that as well. But yeah, I would love to hear what your guys' thoughts are. If you want to see more Doctor Who related content, rankings of other seasons, let me know in the comments below, and I will try and go out of my way to make time to do that. I had extra time, so I figured I would do this because I've been wanting to do Doctor Who stuff for a while. I've just not had the time to do it. And especially since, like, a lot of you who have now subscribed to this channel probably don't know, I started this channel making Doctor Who stuff. That's how this channel started, way back when. So it's nice to come back to it and talk about Doctor Who again. And yeah, I hope you like this. I hope you would like to see more. But yeah, let me know. And if you've never seen classic Doctor Who before, and maybe this has piqued your interest, let me know about that as well. Because I think season 12 is a great jumping on point for someone who might be like, I'm interested to see classic Doctor Who, but there's so much of it, I wouldn't know where to start. I don't know if starting at the very beginning is right for me or whatever. I think season 12 is a really good starting point for people who like new Doctor Who but have never delved into classic Who. I think this is a good place for you guys to maybe start and go, actually, I quite like this. Maybe I will watch the other bits of it and go through it from there. So there's that as well. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please hit the thumbs up button. It helps me know you liked it. It helps it get seen by more people, all that good stuff. And maybe consider subscribing. I do reviews, reactions, gameplay, all that good stuff. So yeah, stick around, hit the subscribe, and you won't miss a thing. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you on the next one.